joined by John Giles to look back on really an historic 2018 World Cup, which had an all-European final where France emerged victorious against Croatia. And John, is it fair to say it'd be remembered as a unique World Cup when you think of all the expectation going into the World Cup surrounding all the big nations, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Argentina, Brazil, and come quarter-final stage, you were looking around and scratching your head to see where all these big nations and where had they all fallen. It was a bit of surreal in one sense.
It was, Jim. Yeah. Well, somebody said to me years ago that the World Cup is an examination of where all the countries are every 4 years, and the examination actually wasn't very good, and the big teams didn't come out very well. You say Germany, Spain, Portugal, Brazil, even. These were the big countries as we know them. But I'd have to say that the smaller countries, if we could call them that, Jim, stepped up to the mark and made a very, very good and entertaining World Cup of it. As you say, like Croatia getting to the semi-finals, playing very well. England getting to the semi-finals, who weren't expected to do anything. So, the draw on one side was very lopsided, as we know, and it was England's good fortune to be in the side of the draw they were in. But they took full advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's sort of unique. I was looking at there and I was thinking to myself in relation to qualification for the tournament, and even the Italians and the Dutch, if they were at the World Cup and they had made it there that far, if they got out of the groups, they would have been fancying their chances the way the things were. But obviously they didn't do their job in qualification, and it was a sort of. From early on itself, I looked at Argentina and the first game, the loss to Croatia, it was just a sinking time bomb after that. And even the Brazilians, they were just too reliant on Neymar. And normally I look back in the 2002 Brazilian team, for an example, where you had Kaká, Rivaldo, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, and a much talked up and hyped Brazil team. But they looked a poor man's reflection going back on poor Brazilian teams that we know from the past.
Yeah, well, see, reputations don't mean anything when you get in there. You've got to do your stuff. And the fact is, Brazil didn't do it. Neymar, in particular, who was supposed to be the leading star, was a huge disappointment. He was diving all over the place. He didn't perform at all, and they were dependent on him. So, Brazil in the end were a disappointment. And reputations count for nothing, Jim, when you get out there. You've got to get out and do your stuff. And the fact is, Italy didn't get there, as you say. Holland didn't get there. Well, the reason they didn't get there, Jim, is because they weren't good enough to do it. Yeah. And the fact is, Argentina, were exposed with a lot of the star players. The manager was no good. Spain ditched the manager 2 days before the World Cup started. You can't do things like that. You have to go. You have to be properly prepared, and that wasn't the case with a lot of the big teams.
Yeah, and John, if you look at maybe some of the games, and there were some real cracking games in the World Cup, and one that stood out to me from an earlier stage, and I thought it would set the tempo for the World Cup, was Spain and Portugal, that Iberian derby. That was really a tiptoe sort of affair, and Ronaldo sort of pulled the bit of magic out at the end, but it really ignited the World Cup, and we said finally it started after one or two poor opening games, and that was probably remembered as one of the games of the tournament, I imagine.
Well, it certainly promised a lot, Jim, and the two teams didn't live up to their expectations, there's no doubt. I mean, that was a terrific game, and we all thought, well, I fancied Spain strongly before the competition started, and they were a huge disappointment in the end, as were Portugal and Germany. There were so many of them that were poor that you would expect to do it. But luckily enough, for the likes of Croatia, England did okay. France did well, deserved to win it in the end. So a few teams picked it up, and despite all the disappointments with the big teams, it finished up a very entertaining World Cup. We tried VAR for the first time, Jim, which I thought was a winner. So No, there was a lot to be said for it. The final was good. So the teams, there's no good reputations don't win tournaments, Jim, and the teams have to go out and do it. And the fact is that the big teams didn't do it.
Yeah, and would you think an awful lot of the French success would go down to the man management of Didier Deschamps? He was very particular on the sort of players that he wanted in the camp, in the dressing room. He said no to the likes of Ribery, as we know. He said no to the likes of Benzema, who would probably walk onto most international teams, but he didn't feel the character, or he probably felt he couldn't control those players and they were a bad influence. And he sort of picked the sort of players that he sort of knew he could craft into a team. And do you think that maybe Deschamps' handling of the squad and his man management style was a big factor, because the French probably looked the tightest of all the groups?
Well, it all, you don't win those big competitions with managers not doing their stuff. There's no doubt about it. And Deschamps, I didn't fancy France actually that very much before, or even in the early stages in the tournament. And I wasn't so sure that Deschamps would be up to it. But you have to give him credit. Well, I have to give him credit. He was up to it, and he managed the team well. He managed the performances well. He got the best out of Pogba, particularly in the semi-final and the final. So he went on to win it, as we know. So you have to give him the credit for doing it, Jim. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I suppose many people would. I remember talking to you 2 years back, and we were talking the Euros. I mentioned Croatia in the quarterfinals, nearly pipping Portugal, who went on to win the tournament, and Portugal caught him right at the end before the penalty shootout. And probably Croatia, I felt, probably learned an awful lot from that experience, and probably drove them on that they knew they were thereabouts in the Euros 2 years before. But maybe the lack of the ball over the top and the runner in behind, that pace up front, was probably the ingredient that probably cost Croatia in the end. We all know Mandzukic was a great man to hold up the ball, but they probably didn't have that threat in behind to worry the French.
They did a lot better than other teams did, Jim. They got to the final, and to be honest, I thought everything in the first half went against them. The free kick, I think Griezmann was taken. I think he did a bit of a dive for that. I thought the penalty was harsh, to be quite honest. That's 2 goals in the game, Jim. But they stuck at it well, and it shows you what a small country can do. Don't forget, Croatia only a population of 4 million.
Yeah.
But they did have Modric. Modric is the best player of his type and has been for the last 5 years in the world. And he was terrific again during the whole World Cup. There wasn't another player like him in any of the other teams.
No, there wasn't. No.
He was great. He was great.
Yeah, and I suppose that brings us on to England, and I suppose not much was expected of them, and I suppose it was a dream sort of a pat they got in relation to, I know Colombia pushed them and tested them, and maybe England sort of folded maybe there late on, and Colombia got right back into it. But then they probably had the game they wanted against Sweden. But when they got there to semi-final, and you get there on merit, but probably that dynamic in midfield probably cost them there in relation to ball retention, and probably not really playing with a real defensive midfield or an anchorman or linchpin. Probably Henderson was probably all on his own at times, and it probably led to their downfall, that they probably didn't get the protection they needed.
Well, you'd have to look back at the whole thing, Jim. I mean, they did well, but they had a lot of luck.
Yeah.
You'd have to say, I don't begrudge England anything, but there's no doubt, you have to be realistic, to say that the group that they were drawn out in the first time with Panama and Tunisia was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have planned that better. And they played them twice before they played Belgium. So they were through before they even played them.
And I suppose Colombia's best player, James Rodriguez, missed the game as well. So that was a big blow.
Definitely. And that went to penalties over there.
Yeah.
So, and the next draw they got was Sweden. So, if you look, if the big teams had been doing their stuff, as we talked about a little bit earlier on, 3 of the major teams, I think, would have been in their half of the draw. And if you look at their half of the draw in relation to the other half, you had Brazil, France, Belgium in one half of the draw, and none of the big teams in England's half of the draw. So I think Southgate did a very, very good job off the field, especially before they went, Jim, because there weren't any great expectations for them to do anything, and they got to the semi-finals, which was considered a big success. But you definitely would have to look. I don't think he did such a great job on the field. Myself, he'd only had one recognised midfield player playing from the start, and that suited him against Panama and Tunisia. But the first test was against Croatia, and they failed in that.
And I suppose, John, if we probably look at countries always have their golden generation, and probably I remember the Dutch probably had 2 golden generations, and probably the second one failed at the World Cup final stage when they lost Spain, the Schneider and Van der Vaart and Van Persie. But this was probably tipped as Belgium's golden generation, the real time to shine at the mark in relation to the quality of players that they had at their disposal. But in truth be reckoned, only really Hazard really stood up to the plate when it was counted for, and the Kevin De Bruyne and those sort of players went sort of missing when on the biggest stage of all against France. And it probably has the time passed now for Belgium.
Well, it could well be. It's going to be another 4 years, Jim, for the next World Cup, and we have the Euros in between. But if you're talking about World Cup, 4 years is a million miles away in football. And actually, I don't think Martinez made the best use of the talent he had at his disposal, Jim, to be quite honest. I think De Bruyne was the best midfield player of his type in the Premiership last season, and he didn't actually play in that position for Belgium. So I don't think they were managed well, and I think it was a big wasted opportunity for the Belgian team.
Yeah, and I suppose, John, that brings us to the big point. Coming out of the 2018 World Cup, where do you think international football stands at the moment, going back in previous generations? I've been watching World Cup since 1994, and I remember all the great Italian teams, the real renowned German teams, backbone by the likes of Muller and Effenberg and Oli Kahn, and real renowned, and the Italians then with Del Piero, Christian Vieri, Nesta, Baldini, all these top quality players, and Spaniards then with David Villa, Torres, Iniesta, Xavi, that real golden generation. Has the standard of international football dipped?
Well, again, the examination is every 4 years, Jim, and there's no doubt that the big teams, the teams that you've mentioned there, didn't perform in this World Cup. But what did happen, Jim, to make it exciting, the teams that we didn't expect to do it, the lesser teams, actually put up a great show. I mean, Japan put up a great show against Belgium. I thought Japan were very unlucky not to do it. We had Croatia wouldn't be regarded as one of the big teams, but they stepped up to the mark in it. So I think the lesser teams in the world have improved greatly over the last few years. And some of the big teams, like Argentina, don't forget Spain went out.
Yep.
Some of the big teams haven't really produced in the last 4 years. So there has been a deterioration at the top of the table.
Yeah.
With an improvement, I think, at the lower end of it.
Yeah. And John, finally, I know I'll have to let you go, but where do you think Ireland stands now? Was it a missed opportunity to Denmark? Could we have realistically got to a quarter-final of that World Cup the way things have worked out if we had got over the line against Denmark? Was it probably a missed opportunity for Ireland?
Well, I think we missed an opportunity to qualify, Jimmy. We've got to qualify first before you get into and get playing in these matches like Denmark did. I don't think it's just what happened against Denmark. I mean, with Serbia beat us by a point, I think, to finish first in the league. And we drew away, and we were beaten at home to them. So I think there's sometimes an exaggeration of the qualities of the teams that we play. I don't think there was any great team in their group. I think if we play as well as we can play, we could have topped that group.
Yeah.
So it didn't just go down to the Denmark match. I think it was. I think we had a chance. Because we saw all the World Cup. I mean, look at Iceland, the performances they can put up in the Euros, and they did well in the World Cup. I think we overestimate the teams sometimes that we play against, and us underestimate the qualities that we have.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the airwaves, and John, hopefully we'll talk again sometime soon, and best of luck, John.
And to you. Thanks, Jim.
Cheers, take care.
Look after yourself. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.